Good morning, everybody. Yeah? Okay, I think we'll kick off. We've given everybody the compulsory 10 minutes to be officially late, so we'll kick off. I just want to say good morning to everybody, introduce myself. I'm Adrienne Harrington. I'm the new CEO of the Ludgate Hub here, and you're all very welcome, and thank you for coming today. We are streaming the event live as well, just to let you know, so anything obviously that happens today is being recorded and will be there for posterity. So thank you as well to our sponsors today, the AIB, and those who have come from there, to Matt, who's come down from Dublin to join us for the day, to Donal and to Haig, and to Maeve and her colleagues here from the branch in Skib. Since the hub opened, the whole community ethos has been really, really important to us. We're very conscious that we are not just a building in town that has no connection with the community, and that sense of being part of the community and contributing to the community has been really important since the hub opened. And farming obviously is integral to the life and the economy of West Cork, and we're really happy to be able to facilitate a day today where we look at the challenges that are there in agriculture, how technology can benefit that, to have a discussion about that, but also to look at real life examples and to see how that actually works for people in real life. And today builds on the Agri Tech Days that we had during National Digital Week as well in 2015 and in 2016. And I'm conscious that some of you will have been there at those days as well, so it's great to see you back. Our guest today from the European Commission couldn't make it. It's a momentous day in Brussels today. Our own Commissioner there, Phil Hogan, is launching a white paper on the future of the Common Agricultural Policy. And like all good policy documents, it has been leaked well in advance. And just looking at a copy of it last night online, and two of the key issues that are being brought up is a higher priority for environmental and climate measures, and also advocating for the greater use of technology in farming. And basically saying that the CAP policy needs to, I suppose, sharpen up in order to face the challenges there for farming today. We're also having an event here on the week where we learned that Ireland is going to most likely be subject to fines of 450 million by 2020 because of our inability to hit our targets in terms of greenhouse emissions, and that's obviously got serious implications for us as well. And we also have just come through a consultation process with the Irish government looking at the whole issue of the bioeconomy. So all of those issues, they're actually really relevant and very relevant to the programme here today. I'm looking at the stats there that came out with the report on the fines, and looking at the whole issue of the emissions and the increase in emissions from farming last year. And I suppose that's inevitable almost as we move to increase the dairy herd and our milk production. But it's looking, I suppose, as to what we can do to mitigate that and how technology can help us there. So there's clearly challenging times ahead for all of us. We'll all have been hearing about the need to be smart. It's coming at us from all angles. The whole issue of, say, for example, in our houses, smart fridges that know when the milk runs out, and that feeds automatically into your smart shopping list, which tells the supermarket that your milk is out, that you have an automatic delivery then of milk to the house. That would happen by drone eventually, and then your bill automatically deducted then from your bank account. So, and like, these aren't futuristic, like the technology is there to allow all that to happen, and people are already using it and testing it out. And so we've got that whole issue of smart and everything being smart and technology driven and data driven at the moment. And the same is true of farming, and we hear about smart farming and smart agriculture and all of that. And really what it is, it's combining farming with technology and data and making things more efficient, and trying to, I suppose, in ways make life easier for everybody. So I was actually reading an article this morning as well, just about the future of jobs, and the interesting statistic that the jobs that our children will have when they leave school, 70% of those jobs haven't actually been invented yet. So it's a kind of interesting statistic just to think about. But that article had a look at agriculture and farming and how jobs in farming might actually change. And just to pick out a couple of the things that they talked about, one of them was using drones to do aerial surveys so that you can map weeds and yield and soil variations, and that's looking at giving an increase of about between 2 and 5% in wheat yields. using a fleet of specialised Agri robots, or Agri bots as they're called, who can actually detect where in the field fertiliser is needed. So you don't actually fertilise an entire field, you just actually kind of spot fertilise. And again, looking at reducing costs there. Monitoring animal health and well-being through sensors, which could increase herd survival and increase milk yields by up to 10%. And then finally, the whole issue of GPS-controlled smart tractors, which have the ability then to reduce soil erosion and also save on fuel costs by up to 10%. Also looking at having every animal in a herd fitted with a sensor, ultimately, so that you can collect data on what's happening in the herd, animal location, all that kind of thing. So it's all about, I suppose, the history of your herd, the animals that you'd know, and combining that then with technology and data then to improve the quality of your milk production and breeding and animal health. So there's lots there in all of that. And then while we're hearing all about that and technology and the CAP, we've of course got the whole issue of Brexit, and as that gets teased out, what the implications are going to be for the agri-food sector as well. So there's lots there, lots of challenges for farming and for agriculture. And what we've done today is that in the sessions that we have is to look at those, look at them from different perspectives and explore how technology can be part of the answer to that, because it's not going to be a complete answer in itself, but certainly it has the potential to do that. And in putting the programme together as well, we were very conscious of the fact that we wouldn't just present the theory, that we actually also need to have people here who are using it, who are experimenting with it, who know what's actually happening on the ground. And so each of our panels today has experts who are directly involved in farming and then non-directly as well. We've left time at the end of each session for Q&A, so I'd ask you to please participate in all of that, and don't go home wondering and think, God, I should have asked that question. Ask it, because there's always going to be somebody else in the audience who's wishing that you're going to be the person to answer it as well. A couple of housekeeping rules just to keep everybody legal. In the event of fire, we've got 2 exits, and I shall do my ta-da through the door here. There's the door behind, and that brings you out onto the lane, and you can escape that way. There's also a door just to that side as well. So I think if you just follow the crowd, we'll be all right. I'll ask you to put your phones on silent as well, if you could. Just also to remember that this is a place of work, that there are people here working today. So if you could just, I suppose, be respectful of that in terms of, especially kind of during the break times. Everything that we are doing today is happening here. All of our sessions are in the room here, and all of the coffee and refreshments and lunch are going to happen in the room where we were earlier on, where you up the other end of the building. But I'm also conscious of the fact that for some of you, it's the first time here, so you're very welcome to a tour at lunchtime or directly after the event. Just come and talk to any of the staff here, and we'll organise that for you, and we can bring a few of you around. Just to say about the building, for those of you who haven't been in any of its previous guises, it was a cinema from the 1940s until the 1980s, closed for a little bit, and then was a bakery then from the 80s up until 2010. And what we tried to do is acknowledge the previous functions of the building here. You might have noticed that we're sitting in a room that's called the bakery. You'd have seen the old projector from the cinema outside as well. Can I ask you as well to feel free to post on social media? We've got the hashtags there, Agri Tech Day 17, so that's fairly easy to remember. We have Brian and Anne from the Southern Star wandering among us as well, and we'll have coverage in tomorrow's paper and next week, so you can go and see if you can find a photograph of yourself and all of that, or whether you've managed to avoid it. This room is going to get warm, just to warn people. There's water scattered about, but when we get out for break, given it's a fabulous day outside, feel free to kind of wander out and get a bit of fresh air in between sessions. Just remember to wander back again. We don't want to lose any of you over the course of the day. We've also decided, seeing that we have a captive audience here, and people often ask me, one of the questions I get asked is, what kind of businesses actually run from the hub? And there's quite a diverse range, but what we decided to do, rather than have me talk about it today, that we're going to give 3 of the startups that are here an opportunity just to come and talk to you, give 2 minutes each, and give a very quick run through of what they do. And we'll have one at the beginning of each of the sessions, and it just gives you a good sense of what's here, and then you can have a tour later on and kind of see what else is happening. So I'm just going to call on the first of those then, Naomi Sheehy then from Luxury Ireland Travel. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Naomi Sheehy. I'm from Skibbereen, and we started, myself and my husband John started Ireland Luxury Travel from we began the beginnings in our family farm in Cree between Skibbereen and Baltimore on our kitchen table. John has a sort of suckler to beef enterprise, is that the right way of saying it? And he's the farmer. I was a solicitor in Skibbereen for a while, and we combined our knowledge of business and we had to learn about marketing and things like that. We put it together, did a bit of research, and we came up with this. So we have no shop front. We have a website that went live in May, 2016. So we continued that, then moved to our home office, again on the farm. So John does all the accounts, the supplier payments. I do the marketing and the sales. He works on foot. He's up and down the farm. He comes in, he does some computer work, he goes again. And then we moved the office in here then in this summer, 2017. So what we do is we package Ireland. So people who want to travel in Ireland, who often are extremely busy, they're quite willing to pay for someone to put it all together. Complicated. It's not vacations as Americans, it's travel. So we organise the transportation, the accommodation, very activity driven, whale watching, farm tours, Skellig Michael boat trips, anything. Basically they come to us with a list of what they want, and we package it all together for basically one price, and we go back and forth and we tweak out all the details. Then we sort out all the details for them, make all the payments, everything is done for them. Our market is usually North America, China, Middle East, New Zealand, and then of course France and Germany and the Netherlands. And so it's brought the whole world in to our farm and our home, and it's fantastic. It's been going really well. We market Google banner ads, targeting different, it's all very researched, and we have a marketing company working with us, and it's been a massive learning curve. It's brilliant. So that's the leisure. We also package similar type travels and tours for corporate American incentive reward packages for their executives, but it's a similar idea. It's the same people. Same type of bucket list travel. And then our third project, and we're working with Adrian and the board here in Ludgate, is we're going to try and attract national Cork businesses, Dublin, London, maybe universities, NGOs, anyone who wants to come down and do these off-site weekends, off-site retreats, boutique conferences. We're trying to bring them down to Skibbereen. Again, the farm tours, the whale watching, everything that we have here to offer. Unique venues and unique experiences for these weekends. So to put Skibbereen on the map. But that's what we're working on for the next year, next project. So it's been great. It's going very well, and we're kind of trying to balance, and we are balancing the farm life and the tech life, and we're on the phone to China in the morning, and we're on to the States in the evening, and cows are calving in the middle of it all. So it's working very well. So that's it. Have a great day anyway, and sure, there's loads of great speakers, and it should be great. Thanks very much.
That's great, Naomi. Thanks so much for that. And if anyone is looking for that ultimate gift for somebody, Naomi's the person to talk to. Okay, we're going to kick off now straight into the first session on the bioeconomy. And I want to introduce our chair, Maire McCarthy, who will be well known to a lot of you, but Maire works with her husband Brian on the family farm in Innishannon. She's a serving member of the board of Bandon Co-op and was lucky enough to have become a Nuffield Scholar back in 2015. She works with Capita as an operations manager and has responsibility then for a number of contracts, including the board BIA contracts on farm audits. And she tells us that she's got a real passion for farming and particularly dairy cows. So I can't think of anybody better to kick off this session, so I'm going to hand straight over to Maire.
Good morning, everybody. I suppose Adrian has said it. My passion is I love dairy cows, actually. So I suppose the route that I've come to work with Capita has been, I suppose, I've gone around a lot of different. I worked with AIB for 20 years, so I recognise some very familiar faces here in the audience. And I suppose I've had the privilege of talking to some of our speakers this morning already, and honestly, you're in for a treat. So what we do at the moment in Capita, we do approximately 23,000 on-farm audits from Kerry right up to Cavan and Monaghan. We're doing about 540 audits a week at the moment. And what we're doing is telling your sustainable story to the world. So the origin green really belongs to the farmers of this country. And we need to tell how super we are at what we do and how the carbon footprint of each litre of milk and each kilo of beef is so, so good in terms of how we compare with our competitors in the world market. So I suppose I was particularly interested in hearing how we can reduce that, and I think the three gentlemen that are going to speak to us today are going to give us some insight into what we can do. So without further ado, I'm going to suggest we listen to what each one of them has to say, and then at the end we're going to take questions from the audience. So it's my pleasure to start with James Gaffney. James is a biorefinery specialist based in Tralee Institute of Technology. He's a native of Leitrim. He stayed in Castletownsend last night and said he thought West Cork was beautiful. Very well.
Thanks, Maire. Thanks, Maire. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. And it is beautiful, beautiful part of the world. I was saying to my wife, all the land around here, comparing it back to Leitrim, it's almost like posh farmers down in Cork back home. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about the bioeconomy. So I'm going to give a kind of a high-level overview, what's happening overseas, international best practice, and things that we could strive for here in Ireland. So bioeconomy is a new word, but it's not, a lot of the things on which it's based aren't that new. Agriculture was developed 12,000 years ago. We've been producing energy from wood for long before that. And even Henry Ford's Model T car was originally designed to be run on biofuels. So a lot of the ideas aren't that new, but bioeconomy brings a lot of these ideas together, but also brings in areas of biotechnology and biorefinery and new kinds of concepts, but also takes into account some of the challenges that we face in the modern world. So a lot of the jobs that bioeconomy underpins are traditional jobs in agriculture, food production, forestry, fisheries, and as we go forward, it accounts currently for close to 20 million jobs across Europe. We're going to be adding in new jobs in some areas like industrial, biotechnology, and these kinds of areas. So I suppose, why do we think that bioeconomy is important? So a lot of the challenges that we face in the 21st century are specifically related to the bioeconomy. The UN Sustainable Goals, they've got 17 of them. Almost half of them are related back to the bioeconomy. So things like we have a growing population. We have about 9 billion people in the world by 2050. How do we feed all those people with safe food? How do we use protein more efficiently? How do we find alternative sources of fuels that aren't based on fossil materials? Things like biodegradable plastics to replace the current plastics that we use. And how do we do that in an efficient way without damaging the resources on which we depend? And a lot about the bioeconomy will be trying to figure out how to use better the natural resources we currently use, but also trying to figure out how to find uses for materials that we don't really use. We see a lot of these materials as residues, as waste, when we can add value to a lot of these materials. And this is some of the things that they're doing across Europe at the moment. So I want to introduce an idea called biorefinery. Biorefinery, or bio-based economy, but I like to call the technologies around it biorefinery, is the sustainable processing of biomass into a spectrum of marketable products and energy. So biorefineries use integrated systems, and they produce what we call a cascade of different products. So things like pharmaceutical products, food, feed, biomaterials, and bioenergy. In a lot of ways, biorefineries could be seen as being like the oil refineries of the future. So in an oil refinery, you bring in petrochemical, you distill it and fractionate it into different fractions like naphtha and produce all types of different chemicals. In the future, it'll be biorefineries taking in biomass and producing a variety of different products. This particular plant is in Cordoba in Spain. In Andalusia, in the south of Spain, they produce 44% of the world's olive oil, and they produce a huge amount of olive waste. So rather than seeing that as a waste, the cooperatives in Spain work with this biorefinery to bring the waste, the olive mill waste, to the biorefinery, and they could just burn it and produce products, but they actually fractionate it into different components. They extract any remaining olive oil that's left and can be used for the food market. They extract polyphenols, which can be used in pharmaceutical drugs for heart disease, which are high-value products which are extracted by chemical solvent extraction. And they use the remaining residues to produce energy for the process and also to sell on to the grid. So it's a very efficient way of extracting value because, as you can imagine, if you just burn, you make a high environmental impact because you're replacing fossil fuels, but you're not getting quite as much value. But if you just extract the polyphenols from the product, you're not making quite the big environmental impact that you would otherwise do. So it's trying to create a lot of synergy and a lot of value from the products. We've all heard the expression that the sum is greater than all the parts, but in a biorefinery, fractionation is the important thing, and it's a case of the parts are greater than the sum in some cases. So how do biorefineries work? In short, the technologies that we look at in the bio-based economy, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for adding value to different feedstocks. For example, when people take wood in and they want to produce an alternative to oil, what we call pyrolysis oil, they can use a thermochemical treatment. When people are taking grass in grass biorefineries to produce products, it's mechanical processing. But if we look at one example like lignocellulosic residues, lignocellulose contains about 70% sugars. It contains C5 and C6 sugars like C5 sugars like xylase and arabinols, C6 sugars like glucose. And lignocellulose is a very widely available resource. You can find it in wheat and barley straw, in corn stover, in woody residues. And it contains a lot of sugar and another component called lignin. So there are a lot of companies around Europe producing, for example, ethanol from the sugars in straw, producing biochemtechs looking at producing aromatic chemicals from lignin. And even if you go up to the University of Limerick, Maurice Collins is working on a project looking at producing carbon fibres, which can be used in the automotive sector as a replacement for fossil-based carbon fibres coming from lignin. So there's a lot of ways which we can add to this. A lot of these technologies, we call them industrial biotechnology. So you have to access the sugars through hydrolysis, break down, pre-treat the material, increase the surface area, and use hydrolysis to convert polysaccharides into monosaccharides, which can be fermented in the same way that you can imagine in the brewing sector. Sugars are fermented and distilled to produce ethanol. So these types of technologies are transferable, but they're now using them to produce all kinds of chemicals as well as fuels as well. So. And I just think it's important that we try and find the value. The value proposition is a key part of the bioeconomy and this what we call the circular bioeconomy. So trying to keep the value in materials for as long as possible. So we can just burn wood, but we can produce all kinds of different products from the sugars and the lignin in wood. This picture is a slice through, and it's just to get people to think about replacing different products that are currently used in the fossil-based sector. So it's a slice through a petroleum barrel, and you can see that about 70%, the color in yellow, is used to produce all the different petroleum-based fuels that we used. Aviation fuel, kerosene, diesel. About 70% of a petroleum barrel is used for that. It makes up roughly the same amount as the 3.5% that is used to make all the different chemicals we use. So detergent, plastics, lubricants, all these different materials just make up about 3.5%, but on a value scale, it's roughly the same amount as what's used for the 70 or so % that's used to make all different fuels. So there's huge opportunity areas by looking at kind of new areas which we haven't considered before, and we're starting to consider in the bioeconomy. And again, I'm getting back to that whole idea of trying to cascade biomass so that we can look at replacing all kinds of different products that are worth a lot of money and can bring greater value and replace a lot of the different products in the bioeconomy. It's something we're going to have to do and something we have to think about. I wanted to share a kind of a case study. This picture was taken in a small port town, just outside a small port town in Sardinia, in Italy. You can see that the ground there is quite arid. It hasn't been productive for wheat production for many years. And it's also a part of the country where they've lost a lot of jobs in this part of Italy. First of all, people have left the farm because agriculture was no longer profitable. But in addition to that, one of the thriving sectors in Porto Torres was that they had a chemical sector. But the chemical sector in Porto Torres has become less and less profitable over the years. It initially was a big chemical industry producing bulk chemicals. The Middle East has become more and more efficient at producing bulk chemicals, and that's going to continue to happen. And so they've had to start producing niche chemicals in order to keep themselves profitable. Niche chemicals has resulted in a decrease in the amount of jobs, and this is a pattern that's been seen all across Europe, where the chemical industry is employing less and less people, and we're going to start seeing more and more chemical industries going out of business. So to try and come up with a solution for why they were losing a lot of people to the cities, looking for new jobs because they weren't able to continue farming, and also to try and find a solution for the chemical industry, they kind of had to come up with a new plan, what they called reindustrialization within Sardinia. And the solution came from a quite unlikely source. We tend to see thistle not in the most glamorous terms, and it's a weed in a lot of cases to most of us, but it's a weed that grows very well in arid land. So they decided to look at this, and someone very smart in Novamont realized that if they could fractionate thistle into different components, they would have a good source of lignocellulose, woody biomass, a good source of oils, and a good source of proteins if they could fractionate it into the different components. So Novamont started working on this, and they started realizing that they could extract mono and diacids from the seeds in the thistle and start looking at producing all kinds of different products like azelaic pelargonic acid, which can be used in production of rubber, in production of plastics, in production of cosmetics, biolubricants, all these types of different products from the oil within the thistle. And in addition to that, they could use the protein as animal feed. They could use the lignocellulose as power for the plant, but also for chemical production. So they decided to take this research to commercial level, and they developed a huge plant on the same site where the original petrochemical plant existed. So a lot of people who were left unemployed by the closing down of the petrochemical sector have now been re-employed in this agriculture-based biorefinery. It's created about over 600 jobs in the region, and it's created a lot of jobs in the supply chain in Sardinia, providing thistle to the plant as well. So it's a really good example of the bioeconomy coming forward, and this is going to be replicated in other parts of Europe as the chemical industry finds new solutions for its problems. This is a map which basically showing how biorefineries are beginning to grow across Europe. This was released by the Nova Institute yesterday. You can see one biorefinery here in Ireland. This is the biorefinery down in Ballineen, Carberry's facility, but it's an area that's starting to take up. A lot of these plants, Carberry being one of the exceptions, but a lot of these plants wouldn't have existed 15, 20 years ago. So it's really an area that's starting to grow across Europe. So from an Irish perspective, I think we're starting to tune in to the opportunities surrounding the bioeconomy from a sustainability point of view, from a value point of view. And, in the last couple of years, there's probably been more movement on this than in the last 10 years from a bioeconomy point of view. In September, we closed the first round for public consultation on the development of a national statement on the bioeconomy, which is the first steps towards developing a national bioeconomy strategy. Now, of course, in Ireland, strategies are developed very often. We need to see policy initiatives and things like that to back it up, which is going to be an important test of it. But it's a step in the right direction at the same time. So in terms of a feedstock and supply point of view, we have in Ireland about 60% agricultural land. We have 90% of that being grassland. We have a growing forestry sector. It's about 10.5%, rising to about 17% by 2030. I think obviously we have a strong agri-food sector in Ireland. We have a strong medical device, pharmaceutical sectors. The way I see it, there's a huge opportunity to displace a lot of the inputs into these current industries in Ireland. So we import about 6 billion in fossil fuels, about 4 billion in organic chemicals, about 1 billion in plastics. There's a huge opportunity to displace a lot of these materials with indigenously produced Irish biomass as the solution to this. But we need to start trying to join the dots and getting people more and more aware of the opportunities that we could do rather than importing all this material, create new industries in Ireland. In terms of the opportunity landscape, I mentioned about lignocellulose, which is basically woody biomass, so all colonies of straw and wood residues. And this is rich in carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. One of the advantages, I think, of shifting to a bioeconomy is that when we work with hydrocarbons, there are certain limitations about the types of chemicals you can produce, and you can actually produce, by the fact that it's a more complex material that you're starting with. You have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. You can produce new materials like livulinic acid, like PEF, a type of bio-based plastic which has better properties than PET, which is produced in the fossil sector. So there's all kinds of opportunities to improve products than those that are currently produced from petroleum refineries. So even companies like Coca-Cola, Lego are starting to look for new products that are bio-based to improve their environmental footprint, that are safer, that can be recycled, and so it's something that these types of companies are starting to realize the opportunities are there. If we look at grass is obviously a widely available feedstock in certain parts of Ireland. It's been used for other things in some places, but where I come from, there's an opportunity to improve grass use for sure. So through biorefining, you can separate grass into different components. Fiber fractions can be used for insulation materials, for biocomposites, it's in the Netherlands. Paper is currently being used in the pulp and paper industry to make packaging materials from grass fibers. The juice can be used for non-GMO feed for cattle and pigs simply by separating a fiber solid fraction and a juice fraction. So there's opportunities for protein optimization to improve protein use from our grassland as well. And then whey, Carberry have been running a biorefinery basically down in Ballineen for 30 years, which focuses on extracting from the whey, taking the protein out and using the lactose that's left to ferment into ethanol, which can be used as a fuel, but can be used as a chemical building block, can be used in the food industry. So this is a homegrown example of what can be done as well. Cellulac are another company that's looking at producing lactic acid and PLA from lactose whey as well, again for the bioplastic sector, which can be used in new areas like 3D printing filament, which is a huge market for polylactic acid. So in terms of how to link agriculture into the bioeconomy, I suppose the most obvious way is as part of a supply chain. So this plant here is in Crescentino in Italy. It produces cellulosic ethanol from wheat straw and reed canary grass. They're actually building a second plant in Slovakia at the moment, which is going to look at dehydrating the ethanol to ethylene building block for polyethylene, which is the most widely used plastic in the world. So that's happening in Slovakia at the moment. This plant here takes in about 320,000 tons of wheat straw and wheat canary grass from local farmers and process it into cellulosic ethanol. So that's the most obvious way to become involved. But I don't necessarily think it's the most profitable way from the agriculture sector. So this is an example of a cooperative-based biorefinery. It's in Pamukal-Bazincourt in France. It originally began life in the 1950s as a sugar beet cooperative and has since transitioned, and more sites have come on to, more companies have come on site. It joined forces with a wheat cooperative called Shamtar, and then over the 90s they decided to invest in an R&D unit to develop their process, to start looking at, okay, we produce sugar, we produce wheat, but what else can we produce to add value to the process? And they started looking at the side streams and the byproducts that they were producing from the food production process. And they brought in companies in the first and second generation bioethanol production areas, cosmetic areas, biochemical areas. And companies started working together with the R&D unit and with the cooperatives to figure out how can we, when we produce this product, what can we do with what's left over? So they started looking at producing ethanol, looking at trading different residues from the process, this idea which is known in the sector as industrial symbiosis. So how companies can work together to see how waste from one process can become a feedstock for another company's process. And they started doing that with straw, for example, but they even started doing this right down to things like carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is produced through ethanol on the site and ethanol production, but it's used for fermentation in biosuccinic acid, a chemical building block. So they started to capture CO2 from the ethanol process and use it in the biosuccinic acid process. And this is all a farmer-owned cooperative producing all types of different biochemicals, biofuels, cosmetics, as well as food products on site. So there's strength in numbers, I think, when we work together as well. And the other thing I wanted to look at was the idea of small-scale biorefineries, which is quite a new area. But I think from an Irish point of view, if we take industry aside where scale is built up on site, we're not the same as some other EU countries. I've been, for example, to Hungary, where they have miles and miles of cornfields and they have the corn belt all over the United States. In Ireland, we have a patchwork of different tillage farmer here, dairy farmer here, and we don't quite have the capacity maybe to build up some of the same scale. So I think small-scale biorefineries could be something we look at in Ireland as well, for example, for the dairy sector, for the beef sector. And it's particularly useful for example, wet feedstocks. So grass contains about 90% water, sugar beet contains about 80% water. So if you're transporting that to a centralized location, the further you go away from the facility, the more expensive it is to carry wet biomass to the facility. It's an idea known as diseconomy of scale. So you can achieve economy of scale within the facility, but the further you go away in the supply chain from the centralized location, the more expensive it is to transport material, particularly with wet biomass. So one of the nice things about the idea of small-scale biorefineries is if you can process your material on a farm, the materials that you don't need to use within the process can stay on the farm. So when you fractionate grass into a fiber fraction and a juice fraction to try and create some kind of protein optimization and use the juice fraction to feed chickens and pigs, and use the fiber fraction either to produce bio-based products like biocomposite materials, bioplastics, or even feed it back to the cow, a lot of the nutrients that you don't use, for example, phosphate that can be reclaimed in the process, can be kept on the land. It's not going to a centralized location. It's been done on the farm. So it's very in line with the idea of a circular economy. So I just wanted to mention before I finish that one of the things that I've been looking at and Institute of Technology have been looking at with Carberry has been the idea of a small scale or piloting a small scale grass biorefinery in Ireland through EIP Agri. So if there's people here who are in the dairy sector or in the region around here who would like to get involved in something like that or would like to learn more about something like that, Enda Buckley or myself would be more than happy to talk to you. Enda's over here, so okay. So I hope that gives you some insight. A lot of it isn't happening maybe in Ireland right now, but there are steps starting to happen in the right direction. That'll continue to happen over the next year or so. And I think it's about trying to create awareness and trying to let everyone know about what could be possible in the bioeconomy. Some of these things need to happen. I think it makes sense if we're importing 10 billion in all types of materials for our industries that we could be doing right here in Ireland by optimizing our sectors and creating greater value, then why not look at doing it? So thanks everyone. Thanks for your hospitality.
So thank you very much, James. That gave us great food for thought. Our next speaker is a native of West Cork, so he knew West Cork was beautiful. He's from Baltimore, James Brown. James is an innovation engineer with Gas Networks Ireland, and we're looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thanks, James.
Thanks very much. So, hello everybody. I'm delighted to be down here in Skibbereen this morning. I see a couple of familiar faces in the audience there. So I suppose a bit of background myself. I suppose I'm from a small farm down in Baltimore myself, so I grew up around farming and I still have a very strong interest in agriculture. I remember doing ag science with Paddy Cleary and the brothers and having a very strong interest at that time and giving Paddy a bit of stick over different things. But I went on then and did civil engineering in college, and then I started working on wastewater treatment projects, and then I got into anaerobic digestion, which was used primarily for treating wastewater treatment sludge and generating biogas. And then I got interested in that whole area of biogas and went back to UCC then and did a lot of research in biogas. Spent a few years up in Northern Ireland then working as a research scientist with the Agri, Food and Biosciences Institute. At that time, Northern Ireland was taking off with renewable energy on the back of a lot of good subsidies. So there was a lot of work went on in biogas there. A lot of farmers developed AD projects, and there are now about 55 agricultural anaerobic digesters in Northern Ireland, and they're all doing very well out of it. So then I started working with Gas Networks Ireland. Some of you will know them as Bord Gáis, which is the old name for Gas Networks. This is essentially a map of the gas network in Ireland. So I suppose the furthest southwest it comes is to Ballineen, so it brings gas down to Carberry milk products for the processing of the milk into cheese. There's also a new line being built down to Listowel, which will hopefully come near to Tim, who's not too far away there in Causeway. So the gas network, I suppose one of its advantages is that there are about 680,000 gas customers connected. About half of it is for power generation and about half of it is for heat, and that's broken up into industrial heat and residential heat. So that, I suppose, the area I'm working in then is very much around the renewable side of gas. Obviously natural gas comes in, about 60% of it comes in through Corrib, off the northwest there in Mayo. If I can get this thing to work here for me. It has gone off the screen, but anyway, you can see the Corrib field there. About 60% of the gas comes in there, and the rest of it comes from the UK, from Scotland via the interconnectors. So that's just a little bit of a background there. I suppose the policy background, a lot of you will be aware of. I suppose a lot of it is in the news at the moment around Ireland's renewable energy sources. We're not doing so well. We have a target for 16% by 2020, and the EPA are telling us that we're going to miss that by some distance. We also have a target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 20% less relative to 2005. That's another target that we're at the moment looking like missing. And I would have to say that it is really a lack of policy implementation that has kind of led to this, because we do have the potential, and actually agriculture has huge potential. So agriculture is often labelled as being the naughty boy or the naughty girl in the class, but in fact there is actually huge potential within agriculture to decarbonise the energy sector, and also to help us with the bioeconomy, like James Gaffney was talking about there. So I think agriculture should be leading the way, and definitely has a lot to offer in terms of how Ireland meets its targets. This is a picture of an anaerobic digester in Kildare, in a place called Nurney, just south of Kildare village. And that facility is co-located on a pig farm, so they take in about 25,000 tonnes of slurry from the sows, and then they have about 25,000 tonnes of food industry waste. Everything from paunch content to pizza dough to other sort of food industry residues. So this is a project that we're working with in partnership at the moment on a demonstration project for getting biogas to a natural gas standard. Now, this facility is currently producing electricity and heat from the biogas, and they're actually producing more than they need at the moment. So we're looking at using that excess gas and upgrading it to a natural gas standard and injecting it into the gas network. So I'll speak about that a bit more in detail later on. So this is, I suppose, a simplistic overview of what a biogas production system might look like. Some of you will be familiar with it from maybe reading the Farmer's Journal. Maybe some of you have visited digesters before. But it's a very flexible technology, and it can very much fit in with the whole bioeconomy strategy, in the sense that you effectively can feed the digester any sort of residue or waste or anything that is an organic material that can break down. Usually they refer to soft materials. So you can have cattle slurry, you can have food industry waste, dairy processing waste, wastewater treatment sludge, you could have fish waste, you could have seaweed, you could have grass that could be grown in excess of forage demand. You could have any number of things, and they can all be basically made into a soup that can feed the digester. Some people make the analogy that the digester is like a large cow. Effectively, it is one big stomach that is inside in a tank. There's a lot of complex microbiology goes on within the tank. So the tank is the bit you see, which is kind of simplistic enough. You know, it's not much different to an above ground slurry storage tank. But these tanks are heated, insulated, they're mixed, and it is really what happens at the microbiology level where all the activity is happening. And basically, the bugs are breaking down the solid material into acids, and then they're using the acids to make methane gas and CO2. So that gas then can be burnt directly in a boiler, or it can be burnt in a combined heat and power engine to make electricity and recover heat from the exhaust, or it can be purified to a natural gas standard and injected into the grid. So in countries in the UK, in France, Germany, the Netherlands and Sweden, they've all made huge progress in terms of upgrading biogas and injecting it into the natural gas network. And there's 6 countries in Europe that have a target to be 100% renewable gas by 2050. Now that's a fair distance away, but it's a big achievement if they can make it. And some of them are at about 10%, so Denmark is about 10% renewable gas. So a lot of people would be well aware of renewable electricity, but in Ireland we're a little bit behind the curve when it comes to renewable gas. The digestate then is the product that comes out the back end. And the digestate really in its raw form is very similar to a low dry matter slurry, so it would be maybe about 3% dry matter. The difference is that that digestate has been pasteurized and homogenized, and it is a very good product in the sense that you can know with good certainty that you can have, let's say, 3 kilograms of nitrogen per ton. And it's, I suppose, that homogeneity allows better nutrient management, because if you're dealing with slurry, particularly on a pig farm or even a dairy farm, you could get a very watery slurry from one tank and a very thick slurry from another tank, and you could be getting one part of the field that gets a lot of nitrogen, another part of the field that doesn't get much. So with this, you can really manage your nutrients better, and there's a whole aspect of biorefinery around digestate, which James referred to there in the previous presentation, around separating phosphorus out and ammonia and nitrogen. And there's a whole area of research and development there on how to get extra value from the digestate. And for example, to the point that you could get pure ammonium solution that could be used in an industrial process. And these are all the little added value chains that can make an AD system really viable. So this is the just an infographic then of how, I suppose, the vision for gas networks, what we'd like to have, which is kind of in a way going back to the future a little bit, because initially gas would have been distributed at town level. And my grandmother used to tell me that there was a gas works in Skibbereen long ago, and there was a gas works that produced synthetic gas from coal, and that would have been used. So in a way, this is kind of going back to that idea where you can produce gas locally, and effectively it's renewable and it's sustainable, and you can use local resources. So that's the idea. Now, the interesting thing about gas is that you can use it for all different energy uses. So you can use it for heat, you can use it for electricity generation, and you can also use it for transport, and particularly for heavy goods vehicles like trucks or buses. And certain countries like Sweden now, for example, and the UK are going down this route where large fleets, such as for Waitrose and Tesco, they're going over to CNG, compressed natural gas, and they're buying biomethane from the grid. So a producer can put in the biomethane and effectively then trade it to somebody else who's connected to the grid, and they can take it out, and you have a kind of an end-to-end mass balance. And that is a growing opportunity. I'll speak a little bit more about what gas networks are doing on the gas for transport side in a minute. And then looking at, I suppose, the agri-food industry, it's huge in Ireland and very important for our local economy. Carberry would be a big player in the southwest. Dairy Gold have made a lot of advances as well in terms of growing their facilities. When I was doing research in UCC, I went down to Carberry to actually see their anaerobic digester there and get inoculum, so get the bacteria from their wastewater treatment system to do research on it. So Carberry have that system, and I suppose there's a lot of synergies here between the agri-food processing. They're large energy consumers, and they need gas to generate steam to evaporate the milk. And you can't really do that with an electric heat pump. So you need that sort of high energy processing. And there's ways to cut down the energy and to make it more efficient. But at the end of the day, you're taking in a product that is maybe 90% water, and you're having to dry it down to a powder. So you need energy. And one of the ways to decarbonize processing would be through biogas. And this is something that has taken off big time in Scotland at the distilleries. Across Europe, all big processors now are looking at biogas as the way to reduce the carbon footprint. So these companies here have expressed a desire to go green. Origin Green, Maire mentioned there earlier, is very important for Ireland's marketing. And there's a lot of good work being done in terms of auditing our full supply chain, and all these companies are very aware of the carbon footprint and how it will affect in the future, and now today as well, how our products are sold and how they're marketed abroad. So there's a growing awareness from industry about the need for renewable and for green gas. So I suppose just to talk briefly Ireland has been identified as a country with essentially a very large untapped resource of biogas. So effectively this graph is taken out of a report done by the European Commission by a group in the Netherlands, and the bit highlighted there now in the green circle shows Ireland's potential. The green bar is for 2030. So we've been identified as, out of the 28 member states of the European Union as of today, that we have the highest potential to produce biogas, but unfortunately very little is actually making it through, and that comes back to our lack of policy implementation. SEAI then published a good report in the summer assessing the potential of biogas and biomethane. Biogas is effectively the raw product, and biomethane then is when you upgrade it to a natural gas standard. And they reckon that 28% of natural gas demand could be met with renewable sources. So the potential is there, and there's no doubt about that. Now, when you look into where is all this potential, when you break it down, there's a good bit of it there is waste-based, but then you can see the green bar there is the potential for additional grass, and I suppose this is a topic which, you know, there's a bit of debate about it, but in this part of the country, generally speaking, our grassland usage is very good, and there's no doubt about it that dairying is the best, most economical way of using grassland. But there are large parts of the country where, for whatever reason, dairying doesn't seem to be viable, for whether it is the size of farm or lack of experience. And there are large parts of the country that are underutilised, particularly in the Midwest, in the Northwest. There are large areas of land that are underutilised, and farmers have very low stocking rates, and there is potential. Now, it's not to say that all that potential should go to biogas, but there's a resource out there that is untapped, and it could be used for many different things, and James was talking about the biorefinery concept there. So there's opportunities out there. This is kind of a bar chart of Ireland's current energy demand. So roughly speaking, 40% is heat, 40% is transport, and about 20% is electricity. And we've done a good bit on electricity, so we've had development of a lot of wind, and that's a good thing. But we've done very little on the transport, and we've done very little on the heat. So these are two areas where policy implementation needs to happen very quickly if we're to make any level of progress. And there is a notion that we can buy our way out of the 2020 targets, that we can buy excess renewable certs from other countries within Europe. Now, that might work in the short term, but there's going to be a 2030 target of 35% renewable energy sources, so we're not going to be able to buy our way out of it forever. So the sooner we start acting, you know, these benefits then are felt locally, then in local employment. This is a map here which is taken from a study by Richard O'Shea in UCC. And it's a very detailed study, in fairness. So he looked at the CSO data and was able to plot where these resources are exactly. And this map shows where the slurry resources could be. So you can see County Cork there features very strongly in the dark blue. So that would be a reflection of a lot of dairying. Now, how you gather that slurry is another question. A lot of our dairy systems would be pasture-based, and cattle would be outside for a lot of the year. But there are systems which are confined systems. Zero grazing is getting popular in some parts of the country. And there is potential to collect slurry and have a centralised AD facility which offers an outlet for farmers to bring their slurry, particularly October when maybe we've had not such a great summer and autumn, and ground conditions in a lot of the country wasn't great for spreading slurry. In this case, you could bring your slurry to a digester, and then you could take back digestate in the spring of the year when you could land spread it and get the value of the nutrients. So this is just an indication there of the level of study that has gone on in this area. There's a lot of good work has been done, particularly in Chagas Grange. Pádraig O'Reilly, very well respected agricultural scientist, retired there recently. He would have led a lot of work into looking at grass and slurry and different varieties and different potential end uses. McCarthy did a very good report on this notion of additional grass capacity as well. That's just circling where we are. This is the digester they're building in Teagasc Grange. So JJ Linehan, who's their buildings officer, gave me these photographs, and in fairness, JJ I worked with him when I was based in Northern Ireland as well, and JJ has been a bit of a pioneer in terms of developing anaerobic digestion at farm scale, and he's telling me that there are farmers and contractors that are queuing up to see could they supply in grass silage into this facility. This is a small scale facility. It'll produce 150 kilowatt of CHP. So it's a relatively small scale. It's built by a Northern Ireland company called Williams Industrial Services. And as you can see there, there's an Abbey diet feeder which is used to feed in the grass silage and mix it in with the slurry and feed it into the tanks. So I mean, the beauty of anaerobic digestion that I see is it's all very much local employment. You know, you've got local Irish contractors that can build the tanks. You've got local equipment suppliers that could supply diet feeders and that sort of equipment. There are certain bits of technology that would be imported, but in generally speaking, you would have on this size of a farm, you would have maybe one full-time person managing the digester. At a bigger scale, then you might have, you know, 3 or 4, depending on the size and the feedstocks you're bringing in. The Grass 10T campaign, this is a very interesting initiative by Teagasc to increase the amount of grass utilised per year. And I mean, this is a very, there's no doubt about that grazed grass is the cheapest fodder, and maximising that grass potential and that grass yield will drive efficiency. Grass is also, in fairness, a very environmentally friendly fodder because effectively it's continuously growing. It's a perennial crop. You're getting continuous conversion of CO2 into the grass plant, and that's going into the soil as well. So there's a whole area of research going on about carbon sequestration from grasslands. There are parts of Europe that land has been really damaged through intensive tillage farming, and they're converting back to grassland to try and recover the organic matter, try and improve the carbon sequestration and improve the soil conditions. So in Ireland, we're lucky in the sense that our soils are generally good. We don't generally have problems with compaction or low organic matter in soils, but we have this ability to grow a lot of grass. And like the Germans can grow maize very well, and they can get, you know, your 12, 15, 20 tons of dry matter per hectare. But in Ireland, we have a great climate for grass. And, you know, particularly in the southwest, grass can start growing. You know, it might never actually stop growing in some years. Now, obviously, with you know, the cold temperatures, it'll stop growing, and you need about 5 degrees for grass growth. But generally speaking, if grassland is managed well, and if the nutrient balance is correct, you can really get a lot of yield out of it. So just exploring what sort of resource could this be. Obviously, the dairy farmers will want as much grassland as they can get for dairying, and there's a lot of expansion going on, and that's great, and I'm a big fan of dairy farming myself. But there are other sectors then that may not be doing so well. So the circular beef farmers are getting a bit of a hammering at the moment with low prices, and maybe there's other things that could be done to maximise that potential. So there's this notion of the hidden hectares, which I think is an interesting concept, and effectively through better land management you can actually get more yield. Now, what you do with that yield obviously depends on market conditions. But effectively, what I would say is that you can continue your milk production and your meat output and grow more, which could be used for energy or bioenergy or refinery. So there's something in there, I think, that's worth exploring and teasing out the detail. This is a picture again I got from JJ. Now in County Meath they have very good land, and the Meath farmers they often kind of a joke that a meat farmer is lazy because the ground is so good they don't have to do much with it. And this is an example. This is good land that's right next door to, let's say, well-managed beef farm. But this land is basically more or less lying idle. They take one cut of grass off it. They don't really take the bales away. It's kind of left there. Obviously, the farmers maybe drawing the single farm payment and doing very little. So this is kind of an example of where you might find those hidden hectares. Then looking at it from, let's say, an emissions point of view. Now, I picked a beef example here because I think the beef farmers are a bit struggling at the moment, and this might be the area where there is potential to grow excess grass. So if you take a typical beef farm, you might have a stocking rate of 1.25 livestock units per hectare. A very good beef farmer, and I suppose these would be the exception rather than the norm, might be utilising up to 12 tonnes of dry matter per hectare. They're getting a beef output, assuming a carcass weight of 350 kilos of 438 kilos per hectare. That has an associated emissions of 8,760 kilograms of CO2 per hectare. Now, if you take a scenario where the beef farmer may, for one reason or another, and this is only an indicative example, might decide, well, instead of a relatively high stocking rate, I might cut down the number of cattle and I might give some of the land over to growing grass for a digester. Well, in that case, when you work down the figures, you still have your beef output, but now you're also getting a biogas output which has a zero carbon associated with it, and now you're actually into carbon negative territory. So the CO2 savings that you make from producing the biogas offsets, and actually more than offsets, the beef emissions, and you're actually minus 385 kilograms of CO2 per hectare. So that's just, I'm not saying this is a realistic scenario, but it's an example that by doing both, you can actually have a win-win. These are some of the stakeholders we've been engaging with, particularly a lot of the agri, food and beverage companies. Public transport are very interested in the idea of biogas buses. It seems to be a concept that's catching on a lot in the UK. Hopefully we'll get some policy movement on that. The Department of Communications, Climate Action and Environment, we still call them energy, but they have a big role to play in this. We're waiting for a renewable heat incentive for the last 2 years. We're told that will be announced before Christmas, but who knows. The Department of Agriculture then are very important stakeholders. There's a huge, I think, synergy between the bioeconomy, between bioenergy and agriculture, and I think it's a win-win. I don't see it as competition. I see it as collaborating and complementing. We've engaged with a lot of biogas developers. Tim now will be speaking about that experience, and we've engaged with a number of people like that, technology suppliers, and a lot of research has been done and continues to be done in this space. Particularly interesting in UCC, there's a cluster called the Marine Renewable Energy Institute, and they're looking at all different types of renewable energy. They're also looking at seaweed cultivation for biorefinery and biogas production, and there's a lot of interesting research going on there. So it's a space, I think, that could have a very positive impact on coastal communities and getting more out of the sea. This is green gas certification. This is a big thing now in Europe, where biomethane producers are able to trade their gas to different customers and get different value from it. It's something we're at the very early stages of developing in Ireland, but theoretically, if you sold your gas into the grid, you could then use it and get an extra value for that gas, because of these large energy consumers. They need to have sustainable sources of energy. So that's something that we're working on as well. The Causeway project, I'll talk very briefly about. It's something we're actually doing rather than talking about it. So this is a kind of a pilot project co-funded by the Connecting Europe facility. It's to roll out 14 compressed natural gas filling stations for heavy goods vehicles. It'll be publicly accessible. The first one is in Dublin Port. That's due to be opened in early 2018. And this is another avenue then to get biomethane into transport and to get a new market. So that's an image there of the Dublin Port facility. A lot of trucks going through the UK. There's more and more of them converting over to compressed natural gas. The demonstration project, which I mentioned at the start, is in partnership with a biogas producer in Nurney, Green Generation, and they're essentially working with us to inject biomethane into the grid. And that facility has potentially the capacity then to take in gas from other producers as well. So the gas is upgraded by a membrane system which separates the CO2 from the methane. The CO2 can also be sold as a product. It's used in carbonating drinks, etc. The biomethane then is compressed into a trailerized unit, and then that's transported down to an entry facility, which will basically let down the pressure, let the gas flow through. It'll measure all the gas quality parameters, make sure they're in line with the specification. It'll do the odorization of the gas as well, and then the gas then flows into the network. And we would like to see this rolled out. Obviously, this is going to take a lot of effort, a lot of government policy support and action. It's going to need either a carbon tax or a subsidy or something to stimulate it, because the fact is that natural gas prices are about 2 cents a kilowatt hour wholesale, where you need about 6 to 7 for biomethane. So there's a gap there, and we need to figure out how we're going to cover that gap. This is just a screenshot there of West Cork. Obviously, the gas network comes to Carberry, Milk Products and Ballineen, but I think there's room definitely for at least 3 or 4 of these facilities that could take in a variety of wastes, slurry, excess grass, whatever is available and whatever is economically viable. There is a project I'm aware of near Timoleague which is developing, and they hope to start work on it in the new year. That will be based near Timoleague, and there's big synergies there in terms of that Courtmacsherry area gets a lot of runoff from different sources of slurry. It's an intensive agricultural area, and this facility then could help actually deal with those environmental problems by offering an outlet to farmers for slurry when the ground is wet, or at certain times of the year where they don't have storage. And these are the type of secondary benefits that anaerobic digestion can really offer farmers. So this is a kind of a notion you could have, for example, down the road, an AD facility in Skibbereen that could be producing biomethane to fuel a truck for Drina Co-op that could be going around collecting milk. And these are the type of things that are actually happening in other countries, and I see no reason why they shouldn't happen here either, and I think it would have huge benefit for the local economy. So just to summarise then, I think this is an area where there's big opportunities for farmers. I've seen it myself firsthand in Northern Ireland. A lot of farmers have done very well out of this. It's a great story in terms of mitigating greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture. It's a very proactive approach. A lot of opportunities for rural development, jobs that would be in local towns and in rural areas. And this, I think, is an example of the bioeconomy in action. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. All I heard was that we don't have to spend any more on our slurry storage, and I can horse it down the road. It's great. So thank you very much. So the next speaker is Tim Leahy. Tim is from Causeway in County Kerry, and I promised him I wouldn't talk about the Munster final that happened last Sunday that I had the pleasure of being at, where Nemo Rangers beat Dr. Crokes by 5 points. But I didn't mention it. So James is a tillage farmer from Causeway, and he is involved in the development of an anaerobic digester. So welcome.
Thank you, Maria. Great to be in West Cork. When I was 12 years of age, my parents sent me down to Carricknavar Secondary School, to an all-Irish boarding school, and I spent 5 wonderful years there. So I have great memories of Cork, and I love coming to Cork. And believe it or not, I'm probably the one Kerry man who's always supporting Cork. Once Kerry are out of the football, well then Cork are my second choice. And funny enough, where I come from in Causeway, in North Kerry, it is pretty good old land there, and it is nearly all huddling we have. and we have no football team in Causey, which is all. There's 8. The Kerry hurling team is picked from 8 clubs in our Kerry: Causey, Ballyhaig, Ballydufflick, Kilmiley, and that's where the Kerry hurling team is, because it's good land. The rest of it is only, as you know, it's the mountains or whatever. So they can kick a bit of football there, but for us we have the good land. So I prefer to go to the Munster hurling final than to go to the football final, to believe it or not. Anyway, about 2 weeks ago, Paul Kingston, who's a great friend of mine, rang me and he said, Tim, he says, will you come down to Cork? There's the Ludgate Centre in Skibbereen, he said, and they're putting on a presentation on agriculture and biorefining and biogas and all that. And I said, Jesus, Paul, sure, a simple Kerryman like me, what would I go down to there for? So I checked the internet anyhow, and I saw some great illustrious speakers who've been here with the last number of years. And I went back to Paul. I said, Paul, I wouldn't be able for that at all. So he said, come down and tell us about the challenge you have for building this biogas plant. And, you know, I'll just talk to you for the next 10 minutes or so about the challenges, because James's presentation was absolutely brilliant, and that's where we want to go. And that's where that there is no doubt in our mind that is the future. As you know, every one of you who are farmers down here, we're only being pittance, right? Fair enough, we're getting 47 pence a gallon or a litre now for the milk, but this time last year we were 21 cents. We got 150 euros a tonne for our corn. My father was probably getting 200 pounds a tonne 30, 40 years ago. You know, the beef, as you know, like, is on the ground. So, like, the reality is this: as farmers, we're never paid for the amount of long hours and slavery and tormentation and heartbreak that we put into farm. Have no doubt about that. You know, we might be getting 47 cents a litre now, or 45 or whatever it is, but that's maybe temporary. That's the reality of it, you know, whether we like it or not. So I'll just divide my talk into the four sections. I'll just tell you a little bit about ourselves, tell you a little bit about what we've achieved so far, tell you a bit about the finance of it, and the future of it. So I was farming at home in North Kerry, in Causeway. Many of you may have heard of Causeway because Dairy Master is a wonderful company which is right alongside us at home. They have 300 workers, and really, like, tis absolutely for us. All the young people are at home, and when I went to the pub in Causeway and I see all the 25-year-olds, the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, I said, Jesus, thank God for Dairy Master, because otherwise they'd be over New York or Chicago or over New Zealand or somewhere like that. At least they're keeping our young fellas at home, and they're giving them good jobs. You know, so we're farming about 500 acres at home. We're mainly tillage farmers. We grow maize, we grow beet, we grow a lot of winter corn and spring barley and so on and so forth. The maize we grow for local farmers. At the start of the year, a farmer might tell us that he wants 200 to 300 tonne of maize. So we'll grow the maize in our own land, and we'll sell it. Deliver it to their yard at so much a tonne. The corn we sell to Kerry Co-op, and then the beet, you might be surprised to know, like, we grow about 40 acres of beet every year, and we grow that, and again we harvest it and sell it to the farmers. You know, we carry a load of beet, and they feed their cattle with it, and so on and so forth. We also have we also do a little bit of contracting. We do the silage contracting. We have in the maize, so we have the maize seeder setting under plastic. So we're the only ones in Kerry with the maize seeder for setting under plastic. So we go all over Kerry and we harvest that maize as well. About 10 years ago, my brother Morris went over to Germany, John Deere, because we have a John Deere harvest and a couple of John Deere tractors. They invited my brother Morris over to Germany, to the John Deere factory, and after visiting the factory, they took him out to see an AD plant, an anaerobic digestion plant, and he was blown away by it. And he came home to me and he said, Tim, he said, we could do that in our farm. And I said, what? And he said, we could produce electricity on the farm, he says. From slurry and farm manure. And I said, we'll go away, for Jesus' sake. How can the name of Jesus can we produce electricity from farm manure and slurry? I don't even bloody mind. Right? So, I researched it, and I got onto a company called Ketco, which many of you probably heard of here in Cork. And there was 3 great young fellas working there at the time. There was Paul Kingston, Des Buckley, and Declan O'Sullivan, 3 West Corkmen, and they're 3 great friends of mine all the time. And so they were actually taking farmers over to Germany. And they had a link, Ketco had a link with Agri at the time, which is a company which built 600 or 700 of these AD plants in Germany. So we went over, and to be honest with you, I was just blown away by it. I thought, Jesus, this really is the future. You know, the fact that we can put our slurry and farm manure and maize and beet and whatever else we can put our hands on into a tank and mix it up, get the gas out of it, and put that gas into an engine and generate electricity. You know. So the boys in Kekko said to us like that maybe we should do a feasibility study. So they charged us €24,000, which is fine in Deer. That's all the fools in the Kerryman, right? So they charged us 24,000 to do the feasibility study. Now, as well as that, that included the planning permission as well. So at least that wasn't too bad. So we got the planning permission in 2012. Now this is 10 years ago. That's why I'm up here, because of the struggles and the challenges, right? 10 years ago, 10 years ago we started. So by 2012 we had our full planning permission, which wasn't too bad. The planning fees was 28,000. And then you've no business having all this unless you can get a grid connection. So fortunately for us, there's a substation on the farm, an ESB substation. So we applied for permission to join the grid, and they came back and they said they charged us 42,000. Which again wasn't too bad, because 42,000 is small in comparison to many people have been charged 100,000 to 200,000 or maybe much more. So already now we're down 100,000. We haven't even taken the shovel out of the shed yet to dig a hole. Do you know? So we had the grid connection. The next thing now is to produce the power, then we to get someone to buy the power. Right? So there's 8 utilities in Ireland which sells power to the public and to companies, whatever else. There's ESB networks, there's Board Gas or Gas Networks Ireland, sorry James. There's electricity, and there's many more. So we went to ESB networks, and we went to Board Gas at the time, and we went to electricity, and they literally laughed at us because we're building a 500 kilowatt plant, which is only half a megawatt. Now, what they say, and those farmers who are here thinking of doing something similar, that you spec your plant to the amount of acres you have. So that's the general gist of it. Like, so if you have 250 acres, you build a 250 kilowatt plant, etc. So we were going for the 500 watt plant, and they said to us, "Come here, don't be talking to us at all." They didn't even engage with us really, and they were saying a minimum that they would talk to is 5 megawatt. So back in our backside again. So there was my friend Paul Kingston, and Paul knew. Guy in VRYU, which is a massive international company, which is only a small company here in Ireland, and they're one of the utility companies which are selling electricity, and they were looking for renewable energy projects to buy the renewable energy from the producer, so they could sell it out to the consumer. So we got a 15-year power purchase agreement from them at 16.5 cents a kilowatt, right? So that was fine. So now we had the power purchase agreement. The department to get the refit, you have to all renewable energy is subsidised. So to get the renewable energy, to get the refit 3, there was refit 1, refit 2. Presently there is presently refit 3, although that has finished now. They're working on refit 4. You had to have this thing called a higher efficiency CHP. So in other words, the engine that you will produce that you'll be feeding the methane gas into and producing the power, that had to be a higher efficiency. So in other words, you had to prove to the Department of Energy Communications that 70% of what you produce is usable. The heat is usable, right? So now, what I wanted us to do now was to produce a documentation to say that an engine which yet hadn't been built was going to be 70% efficient for the heat and 100% efficient for the power. Almost impossible, which was done, right? So we So we did our paperwork. So we got the higher efficiency CHP certificate, and then we would call it, once you get the higher efficiency CHP certificate, then you get refit 3. And refit 3 is the subsidy from the government to generate electricity. At present, to the best of my knowledge, there's only 2 farmers, if you can call us that, who have refit 3. So if you wanted to build a biogas plant tomorrow morning, there's no subsidy, because at present they're working on refit 4, not right, James? They're telling us for the last 2 years it will be out shortly. I hope they're better fellas there than the Department of, what was the Department of Justice? Right. So we got our refit 3. we have our power purchase agreement, we have our grid connection, we have our higher efficiency CHP. The next boy is to come into the room is the Department of Agriculture, right? So if you're, because we're mainly tillage farmers, therefore we're going to be bringing in slurry. Like at present, we have farmers ringing us up every day to take in slurry from their as I said, like we have a fairly intensive dairying area around us, so therefore many of the farmers want to export the slurry into our land because the fact that it's ideal for growing maize, ideal for growing beet, and ideal for corn, etc. And it is an easy way for them to get rid of, especially their farmyard manure. So we take that in at present. So once we're taking that in, then, and if we're going to build in a biogas plant, the department says, hold on a second. You need authorisation from us, the Department of Agriculture. So the headquarters of the Department of Agriculture for the animal bioproducts is in Portlaoise. So we had the official who's dealing with the south of Ireland is in Waterford. So I had a number of meetings with him. So I met him and he said, Tim, you have to do A, B, C, D and E and F. And I go back home, draw my plans and this flow and that flow and all different paperwork, and I go back to him and he said, yes, that's fine, but this is what you need to do as well. So I do all that, go back to him again and say, Tim, you need to do this, this, this and this. So about after 6 or 7 minutes meetings, he eventually said, right, Tim, put in your final application now. So we got first stage authorisation from the Department of Agriculture. Right, so we have all the paperwork is now done, right? That height of it. So we were to call it finance. I'll come to the finance later on, but just at this stage, we were talking to various people as regards finance, and we said, look, we'll start in here. Right, so we went into the site, and it's a greenfield site just on the edge of Causa Village, and we started digging. We have our own tractor and diggers and all that. So we dug out the whole site. We put in the underground storage tank. We built the silage base for the maize, the silage, and all that. And we did a few more things, and then we tished up. No money, ran out of money. Right. So in the meantime, then, let's see if all my notes are going here. Yeah, so when we were starting to build in here, there's a whole load of companies out there, mainly in Germany, but they're there in Holland and they're in different places who will build these plants for you. And so we visited a lot of Agricom plants in Germany. Agricom are exceptionally good. Des Buckley, as I said, down first. Des around this part of the country. He's their main salesman for Agricomp. They've built somewhere around 600 plants, as I said, mainly agricultural plants. Then the company, another company called Welltech Biopower, have built about 400 plants. They've built a number of plants in England, and they're presently about 4 or 5 plants built in the north. Energia, there's a whole load of them. You can Google these, and they're all there, and they're all anxious to sell the plants. So we eventually went with Welltech Biopower, and so we decided we'd start building. Now, once we had the silage slabs built, our pits, and the maize, we started putting in our silage and maize into these pits. So presently we have around 10,000 tonne of maize, silage, whole crop sitting there waiting for a biogas plant to be built. And all of you farmers know if it's 10,000 tonne of maize and silage inside in the pit, it's a lot of money wrapped up and nothing happening. You know, and the accountant's saying to you, Tim, how's it your accounts on the red? Where's the money gone? You know. So we're going to keep going. Presently, we're building the storage. There's a storage shed, and then there's a shed or a building for a pasteurisation unit, pump room, offices, and all that. So hopefully by Christmas we'll have all that. We'll have all that complete, and still no money. Right? So at this stage we've pumped about 300,000 euros of our own money into this, you know, which is a lot of money, plus the fact that all the 10,000 tonne of the maize and the beet is there also. So when we decided we were going to build this, of course, I'm dealing with AIB since for the last nearly 50 years. My brother is dealing with Bank of Ireland, and we thought, geez, you know, we have a fairly substantial farm, we have a good business going, should be no problem going in, have a good meet with the bank manager, and sure he'll say, no problem, build away, it's great business, right? So first thing, they said no. So we went back and we asked, why do you say no? And they said no because of A, B, C, and D. And we went back and gave them more. and they said no. And we went back, and we went back again, and they said no again, and we kept barging them, and they still say no, even to this very day. You see, the reality is this: you can understand in one sense, like you say, if you're building a 500 kilowatt plant, you know, the subsidy is 15 cents a kilowatt, and there's 8.5 to 8,756 hours or something like that in the year. Now, a plant is not going to run for 8,700 hours, it's going to run for around something 8,000 hours. Maybe you could get maybe 8,500, but if we base our figures on reality, which is about 8,000 hours at 15 cents a kilowatt, at 500 kilowatt, it's not a lot of money. Do you know? It's a reasonable amount of money, but it's not a lot of money. Then you take around 70,000 to what you call it for a maintenance contract to keep the engine going, because that's your little machine that's going to make the money for you. You know, so then you take the interest and the capital, pay all that back. So and then you pay to run the plant. So it's not a high margin. There's no great big profit out of this at all. But we keep going. So the Bank of Ireland, they engaged with us a little bit, and we had a couple of meetings with them, and they said no eventually. EIB, I went to them because, as I said, they're my bank, and I went again and again and again and again and made different proposals and tweaked the figures this way and that way and the other way, and said, look at all the positives we have, look what we have done, look what we've achieved. This is the income, this is the expenditure, etc., etc. They eventually took me up to Dublin to the bank centre, and they said to me, that, you know, if the only reason we brought you up here because we're very serious, you know, but they still said no. They were more interested, to be quite honest with you, and they said every time the gooch comes up here, he's treated like God. You know, I said, gooch will make feck all money for you. If you talk to the farmers of Ireland, they'll be that's what keeps you there in nice soft jobs, you know. But anyway, so I went to a lot of meetings, and that's why I met James in conferences. And you know, like, there are various funders out there which have financed projects, AD plants in the north. As James said, there's over 50 AD plants in the north. There's around up to 600 of them in Britain. There's 9,500 of these in Germany. It's not rocket science. Do you know, you put your slurry, your gas, the whole thing into a tank. You agitate it up. It's going to bring out methane gas. You clean it, and you generate electricity. Right? So that it is happening. It is a very proven technology. So there are funders out there who have financed various projects in the north and in Britain. So I've spoken to all of them. They have said, okay, Tim, tell us about how about the power purchase agreement, how about the refit, how about the higher efficiency CHP, how about this, how about that, and other thing. So I have my file ready for all of them. Give it to them. They go through it, and they come back, and then they say no. Do you know? We have got no more often no than we have got. Well, we have not got no yes yet. So presently, so where are we at present? I'm presently talking to two funders, which are where there is a little light at the end of the tunnel, I think. One of them came back to me there about 2 weeks ago, and he offered me 3/4 of the money. He's going to charge me 11% interest. He's going to charge me, I'm going to have to give him a whole load of security, which is fair enough. The legals, he said, will cost about 100,000. I said, oh, we're fucking mind. Copy and paste my most of them fellas, and they're going to charge me 100,000 to draw up a few contracts for copy and paste. Do you know, like, these fellas in their collar and ties, they don't deal with reality at all. I'm sure you farmers knows all about this, right? He said, "I'm going to cost. I won't give you the exact figure, which is a very, very large figure. He's going to charge just to organise the finance." You know? So, where are we going from here? So anyway, I have to go back to him and do a bit more arguing, etc., etc. But having said all that, then, so that's where we are. That's where we are at present. We have, as I said, we have most a good percentage of it built. The digesters are the big money, the big cost, like, and so also is the engine. We're looking at various options as regards how we can improve the income. You see, what we're there are presently somewhere around 6 AD plants in the Republic, 6 or 7, but there is no agricultural AD plant in the Republic. There is no agricultural AD plant. In other words, there is no farmer with an agricultural AD plant in the Republic. right? Because it doesn't make economic sense. Right? There, we'll say James was talking about the one above in Nunnery. He has a piggery, but he's also bringing in 40,000 tonne of food waste. There's another one which is in Shanagolden by David MacDonald, and David is taking in I don't know how many thousand tonne of food waste. But he has a gate fee. You know, and that's the route which most of them went down. And if you do get a gate fee, like if you can get a gate fee somewhere around 40 to 50 euros a tonne for food waste, and if you can bring in 10,000 tonne, then you're on a literally 400,000 a year straight away. Do you know, and that's a game changer as regards that. Now there's a whole load of material out there which is looking for a home, not necessarily even food waste, but various other things, and that's where the future is as regards the biogas. I believe, you know, if you go to Germany, as I said, there's 9,500 of these biogas plants in Germany. I believe, honestly, that if there is no grant for these, by the way, there's no grant. If there was a proper subsidy put in, there is at least room for 2 or 3 biogas plants in every parish in Ireland. There really is, like, as I would say, like, you travel the roads of Germany and they're all over the place. And, like, if you think of the nitrate problems which we all have, and as well as that, like James was saying about the finished product which is digested, which is like an organic fertiliser. Do you know, we could reduce maybe 30,000-40,000 a year out of our fertiliser bill, get rid of that fertiliser bill by using the digestate. I was over a farmer in Scotland there last year, the year before, and he had 700 acres of corn, and all he'd spread in that was a little bit of nitre. All his fertiliser was coming out of his biogas plant. So we'll keep going. Hopefully, if you ask me back next year, we'll have the plant built. We may or may not. It might be 5 years' time, but I'm determined to build it. Come hell or high water, even if we've to done bit by bit out of our own money, but it will eventually get there. But as I said, I do honestly believe that there is a great potential in the biogas. People are still sleeping as regards renewable energy. I have no doubt in my mind that renewable energy is the future for all of us. We will all have the driverless cars. We will all have electric cars. We'll all have the solar panels. There's no doubt about that. So on that note, I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer.
So thank you very, very much, Tim. That was very, very interesting. So lads, we'll just throw it out to the floor now. I'd ask you, I suppose I'm conscious there's another lot of speakers coming on, and we need to get our questions in and get our answers fast. So if you put lava Seuss, please, anybody that would like to ask any questions, and we'll take it from there. Or did they just give us so much science that we don't need it?
Hi, I'm Darragh O'Callaghan. I actually part-time farm somewhere on that picture. I've met Tim before. I work for Agri in Germany, but I travel almost every week to Northern Ireland. I build AD plants. The biggest issue, is it policy change by the government? Is that the be-all and end-all?
Yeah, I think if they say 15 cents a kilowatt, when we started this back in 2008, 2009, the refit was only was 12 cents. Then they increased it to 15 cents. Like if you think in the north of Ireland, like in the refit and the Three Rocks, so they're up to about 25, 26 cents a kilowatt. In Germany, they're around 22 cents a kilowatt. Even if they give us an extra 3 or 4 cents, it would be a game changer for every one of you farmers. You know, if they could bring it anywhere at all near the 20 cents a kilowatt, you know, then it would be, you'll be getting at least another maybe 250, 300,000 based on what you produce with, say, a 500 kilowatt plant. And if they give us that 3 or 4 cents, well, then it would be available to every farmer. Like James mentioned the RHI. Now we thought in actual fact that when the RHI was going to come in, that was going to be for people with refit tree as well. But they said no, that it's not going to be for any person who has refit tree will not get the RHI. So you only get one subsidy. So the main thing is raise the refit from 15 cents up to 18 cents or whatever.
And for you, James, you were saying about the gas injection, or we'll say if there was a group of farmers came together here and produced a certain amount of gas, transported to Carberry, injected into the grid, or leave Carberry, use it. I'm involved in a project in Scotland at the moment, which is a farm of about 4,500 acres. He's doing gas injection, 600 cubes of gas an hour, but the transport is from up to 20 miles away. And as I think James, you said, there's economies of scale on site, but it reduces the economy of scale when you have to transport stuff. So I think farmers will look at this and go, if it has to be too big, why would I even bother? It's the small scale and farmers want to be in control of their own patch as well. They don't want to be building a massive plant where there's 20 suppliers and one supplier could mess it up for everything else. That's my own opinion of it. But on the gas injection, the policy that the government is bringing out, do you actually think it'll be before Christmas?
I think the policy the policy is definitely what's missing. So there's no doubt about that. Like Tim is saying that we need to bridge the gap somewhere. Now there are different ways to skin a cat. It could be in the form of carbon tax and recirculating that back into funding projects. It could be in the way of, let's say, a public service obligation like in electricity. It could be funded directly initially from the central exchequer. But unfortunately, there is a view in the Department of Finance that we can buy our way out of the shortfall, that we can buy our way out of our missed targets both on greenhouse gas emissions and on renewable energy sources. And the way they look at it is kind of on an annual basis. 2020, we can buy excess renewable wind from Latvia, and we can buy excess credits from Germany, and we can buy excess credits from Sweden. But when you look at it, I mean, this isn't going to stop at 2020. There's going to be 2030 targets. And I mean, we're selling ourselves as a high-tech economy, which is good, but we also have to put our hand in our pocket at a national level and say, right, are we serious about this decarbonisation or not? Because we're one of 4 countries out of the 28 in Europe that will miss our targets, and that's not a good place to be. I mean, we're on the one hand trying to sell ourselves that we're top of the class, but when it comes down to the reality, and the thing about it is that writing checks and sending it out of the country does nothing for rural economies, does nothing for West Cork. So our elected representatives, I think, should be made aware of this. What are they doing? What are they doing to stimulate rural economies? What are they doing in biorefinery? What are they doing in bioenergy? And like, there's a lot of policy documents have been written. There's white papers, there's green papers, there's pathways, there's draft plans, but there's very little action. And it seems to be that the brick wall is that our Department of Finance are reluctant to put their hand in their pocket and write a cheque. And that is unfortunate. Now there's another issue which I think Tim alluded to, is that the lending institutes are not lending. And that's a big problem. And the European Central Bank, the European Investment Bank are saying, we've got loads of money, we've got it at very little interest, less than 1% interest rate, but yet that cheap European money is not coming in to small projects. They're looking at projects that are 100 million, big, massive infrastructural projects. But there has to be a way of pooling projects like these together, maybe get 10 of them together, draw down a pot of money, and then design review it, have a standardised design, and say, right, Tim can set off and build his one, and build maybe 10 more of them that would be the same. So there has to be a lot of joined up thinking that isn't there at the moment, and people have to work together. I mean, I accept your point there about some farmers will want to control their own system, and that's fine. But I mean, where this has worked well, in Ireland we don't have big farms like 5,000 acres, So we will inevitably have to cooperate more, because our average farm size, I think, is about 50 hectares, and that's probably on the high side, and that's probably in the dairy sector. But so we are smaller, so we will have to work together more. But I think if there's policy and financial instruments and it makes sense, farmers will work together, because they've worked together for milk, they've worked together for beef, they've worked together for tillage, and wherever it makes sense economically, farmers will work together.
Can I just
I was going to ask, have you a precedent, because we had discussed this earlier?
Well, I was going to say that on the policy side, I gave an example of the biorefinery that has been developed in Sardinia, and the solutions that provided for farmers in Sardinia and developing the whole region. But it wouldn't have happened without a simple policy measure that was introduced in Italy, where they banned single-use carrier bags. So from that point onwards, that was in 2011, people had to either constantly reuse bags. They weren't allowed to buy plastic bags like we can here. They were banned. You either it was biodegradable bags, or it was bring back your bag. And without that pull measure to bring this new biochemical industry to the market in Italy, it wouldn't have happened, and the solution wouldn't have came. It wouldn't have been sustainable. So simple measures can make a huge difference.
So the key message really is that it's actually policy. It's really policy that's going to drive this. I suppose the other thing, I just think, this is only my own opinion, but you know, the cooperative, the whole concept of a co-op is, you know, all of us farmers together. Lawrence, I see you. All of us farmers together probably, you know, have an ethos, a working ethos through the dairy co-op. So it's not any one person having to come up like Tim with the money, but if we all have an issue with slurry storage and an opportunity, you know, that's the vehicle.
Well,
if we can get the...
I gave one example of the cooperative biorefinery idea and the strength in numbers, but even in terms of if a sector was set up, and if a biorefinery or a bioenergy plant was developed, I was in Spain recently, and the cooperative structure for the olive sector is really strong over there. And people have told us, the plants that we visit, they much prefer to deal with co-ops, because they're getting a huge amount of biomass. They don't have to go to individual farmers. So there is a lot of benefits to this. And then, of course, farmers are strengthened in negotiating and everything like that as well. So I think that's something we really need to have a look at in Ireland, about redeveloping co-ops.
I agree with your views on policy, but I suppose we come from a very intensive area here, and I know, Tim, you're from a very intensive area in North Kerry, and just there's the danger of maybe much if there's a big biogas plant, there's a lot of stuff will go in there to drive up the costs for the farmers. I'm just saying that this is a fear amongst farmers, but the only thing I'd say to you is that is about the subsidy end of it. Where does the money lie? In Ireland, in dairy, there's 5 or 6 big food plants in Ireland. And like, to be honest, the money lies in the high end. So like, is the money in the biorefinery end, or is it where does the money come back?
The money
unsubsidized.
The money should be inside in the farmer's pocket.
Yes.
Because the farmer's getting up in the morning early and going out in the milking paddock, working hard and doing all the help. That's where the money should be. It's not in it's not in someone else's pocket, the middlemen or the supermarkets or anything like that. To me, if I'm working hard and putting in the long hours, I deserve what I get. I deserve I deserve to be paid well for the work I put in and the slavery and the long hours. I deserve to be paid for that, and paid well. And like, when you take milk into the supermarket and they're getting double and triple what we're getting, that makes no sense to me. And like, in the AD, and I see your argument as well as that, like, AD is, as I said, it's going to be for 2 or 3 plants in, maybe 2 or 3 plants max in every parish in Ireland. That's not going to put a call. It's not going to happen. But it's not going to put pressure on the price of land or anything like that, or of that. But my bottom line the whole time is, the farmer must be paid for what he does.
I understand, but I'm just saying, rather than invest in the one end, which maybe doesn't have the return, invest in the end. We should invest in the end where the return is, and be ahead of.
I would say that obviously, like, from my perspective, at the moment, there's no doubt about it, but the most economical use of grass is into a cow and milk and powder, and you're saying the infant formula, and that is no doubt about it. But the intensity of that process is coming under huge scrutiny. So this is what I would see. This is, in certain places, I would see this very much waste focused, and I would see that particularly around Carberry and the intensive parts of West Cork. There are a lot of wastes. There are a lot of poultry waste, there's a lot of fish processing waste, there's a lot of dairy processing waste, there's a lot of slurry out there as well. And that is, like, there's several facilities are breaching their EPA discharge licenses. So our water quality is very bad. You know, so it's great that our dairy sector is doing well, and I'm a big fan of dairying, but we have to future-proof ourselves. And we have to future-proof ourselves to be able to be environmentally friendly and productive at the same time. So some people call it sustainable intensification. Now that can mean different things to different people, but to me what it means is that if you are going to expand and you are going to increase production, you have to cut down emissions as well. So you have to do both into the future. I think it's going to be very important.
Very good. See you. Tommy? Yeah.
We just have one last question then, and then we'll break. Thanks.
Reference, I suppose, to planning. James Brown, you had the map up of where you could strategically place AD digester, AD plants in West Cork. One was, it was fought by a local community and stopped just east of Clonakilty. How much of a challenge is that? Is it down to lack of information, education from your side, or is it just sheer fear from communities?
Well, I think planning of anything new has to be managed very well. So whether it is an AD farm or a wind turbine or a solar project or even a new industry like a biorefinery. So, I mean, early engagement with the community is very important. Early engagement with the local authorities, selecting the right type of site. Some of the things that you mightn't think of off the top of your head, like proper screening of sites, you know, that they're not a big visual impact. You know, soft things like landscaping can make a huge difference. I suppose, from my experience, if there's people in the locality that are benefiting from it, they tend to be more supportive, and if it's generating local jobs, and if it's clear that it's good for the locality, it tends to go. Now, obviously, there are always people who are afraid of change and they're nervous, and people put out rumours and stuff and they get worried. So that's why information is very important. And like, there are some companies now and they spend a huge amount of money on the information part. And I think that comes back to the likes of the digital hub as well, you know, infographics, you know, web services, YouTube videos, all that stuff gets things out into the message and get good information out there. And if there are concerns, you know, it's good to have them early so that the developers can maybe adjust things. And the developer has to be open to scrutiny and to maybe compromising a little bit as well. So I would say in a lot of cases planning, if it's done right, isn't a problem, but you always have the cases where it can go south.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Very good. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank our three excellent speakers. I'm sure you'll join me in saying it was very, very informative, and we've got an awful lot of thinking to do around the whole area. So thank you very much.
I'd say you'd be a happy man when you get that check.